Hear ye. It is our honor to welcome you to the KingMaker Podcast.
Well, welcome back to the KingMaker Podcast. This is Keith. I've been on more adventures, Alejandro. My voice is actually a little scratchy today, but I will persevere. How are you doing over there?
I'm good. I've been working on a few things on the website, the YouTube channel. We finally got the Curve grant. Everything's going really exciting right now.
Yeah, talk about that for a second. So shout out to Curve. Thank you all for supporting us.
Thank you, Curve. Thank you, Kendrick Lama and C2TP for being nice to us and supporting us from the beginning and the general CVX community. They were really nice. We got our Curve grant a week late from everyone else, but we still eventually got it, which was really nice. And yeah, I honestly was surprised I actually went through with it because because we're not devs or anything.
Yep.
But we got it for being a podcast. It blew my mind on it, actually.
And so our game plan is to upgrade some hardware, get some more software to improve the quality here, and we're going to keep doing our thing, talking to really interesting folks. But really, I'd like to sort of hide where I've put my money or I put my curve that I got in the grant. Who do you think I should use with that, Alejandro?
I don't know. You could always go by CVX if you wanted.
No.
I'm joking with you.
We'll have to try that again. I was going for Railgun.
My bad.
No, we'll just leave it in. How about we find out a little bit more about Railgun then? We have a couple folks here. We have Alan and we have Kai, a couple team members. Welcome to the show, and we're here to learn. We're here to have a great conversation, probably a windy road a little bit more on this episode, but we want to talk about privacy. We want to talk about the state of Railgun, where things are going, what other protocols are popping up that you might be able to integrate with or have some synergy with. So looking forward to a great conversation today. But welcome, Kai. Welcome, Alan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, man. We're happy to be here.
All right. Well, Alan, as we were chatting a little bit before the show, as being out there really talking about the protocol a ton, break it down real quick. Where are you at? What's going on? What's new with Rail?
Oh, yeah. So here's what we'll do, man. I'll tell you what. I will give the layman's breakdown of what we're working on, and maybe Kai, as like the chief architect, can get a little bit more into the weeds, and we'll kind of have that yin and yang flavor of just a degenerate and then a degenerate gigabrain explaining it. So
perfect. And can you share each of your roles first? You mentioned Kai there, but what's your role, Alan?
Yeah. So I've joined the core advisory as the DAO calls me the janitor. I tend to do everything that's not development related, so that is, negotiate contracts, structure partnerships, manage the Discord, all sorts of stuff. I even develop the designs for the t-shirts and swag. I mean, the list goes on. I guess most famously, I was one of the people behind our strategic partnership with the folks over at DCG. They ended up helping support us, and I helped structure that deal back in January. So, just a general designated doer for the crowd. Been on the project advising, I guess, just over a year now. Quit my day job in the traditional finance space and moved to full-time degen, and privacy enthusiast. And I guess Kai, if you want to give a quick intro.
Yeah, I'm Kai, as Alan said. I'm the chief scientist. Basically what that means is people say, hey, can we make contract that keeps funds private? And I figure out how the contract needs to work in order to actually keep funds private. I write a lot of the Solidity code for Railgun, and I design the protocol
Yeah, so he is. Yeah, he's the man. He's being quite modest, and I'll let him be such. But yeah, suffice it to say, Railgun is a privacy preserving protocol that's deployed wholly on layer ones, currently on Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, and of course Ethereum. And it just uses smart contract logic and a bunch of really cool encryption to help you transact in a private way. Right. So basically, what the contract is designed to be is, wallet side privacy for DeFi enthusiasts while maintaining like true interoperability with other DeFi protocols. So if you wanted to do like arbitrary smart contract calls to, you'd mentioned Curve, you could certainly do that. Maybe you want to, receive, convex bribes privately, provide liquidity to Uniswap or, trade via the 0x API, whatever that may be, even flash loans, right? So we tried to make it as flexible as humanly possible to allow people to do the things that they want to do in a private fashion without compromising on the security assumptions that they're making by, using the layer ones that they want to use.
I'm still I'm still like kind of new to crypto. I only been here for like a little bit over a year, like a year and 3 months. But from the time that I've been in crypto, like and specifically DeFi, like the top dog, at least for a while, at least in my opinion, was of like Tornado Cash, right? Like I kind of see them as OG. So it's really exciting to me. Like all these different like solutions are finally coming out because like you're talking about with like different like things like Curve or Convex or any type of like token, that privacy is really important. And I think DeFi is finally starting to see that and is actually like is really going to be a really big market in the upcoming months.
Mm. Yeah, and we're starting to see, I guess, um, we're starting to see a lot of different like, privacy pursuant protocols, right? You have like non-custodial mixers, like you just mentioned, Tornado Cash or maybe, Typhoon Network or whatever, myriad of forks that they have of that. You have things like Aztec Network, and then you have, the other blockchains that are kind of, forming up. Monero and Zcash, they've been around for quite some time, and they both have their own individual strategies for peer-to-peer privacy, and then things like Secret Network. Yeah. So it's definitely we're starting to see like the attention towards privacy is really kind of growing, and I think that's kind of natural. As like user adoption increases, people become like more and more aware, and I think that like this people conflating pseudonymity, the pseudonymous nature of their addresses with privacy, is starting to just like erode. Like they're starting to realize that it's not private at all. In fact, it's really quite public. I mean, that's why they call it a public ledger blockchain, right?
So let me throw this out. My thoughts coming out of this bear market will be that there will be less anonymity from the people involved, but more anonymity on the blockchain. What do you think about that take as sort of seeing the next iteration of what we see,
Yeah,
where
it was really interesting.
we're not
Yeah, like we
cartoon
saw.
characters anymore?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why people are like anon on Twitter, right? Because financial privacy is really quite important, right? No one wants to like link their, money with like their persona in a public fashion. It's a really awkward thing to do. It'd be like, instead of handing out business cards, you gave people like, I don't know, a bank statement or something. Uh, I think like this last, I'm certainly not going to like pretend that like I am like a soothsayer of the markets or anything, but I do believe that a little bit of like what happened here in the market wasn't, actual good and true like price discovery as much as it was like, adversarial chasing of like liquidations on various platforms. We had like all of crypto Twitter in a frenzy, calling out everybody's liquidation points on different tokens, and I think I don't know that that's like really I don't know if that's really good. And I think that we have like on-chain analytics companies getting better and better and growing. You have like Nansen, Chainalysis, Glassnode, the list goes on. Like, and for all their different reasons, they're taking, collecting, collating, and selling people's financial data to the highest bidder for it. And I think that we'll see this kind of come to a head, in the next, 18 to 24 months. I mean, I don't know, Kai, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's like just on the point of like pseudonymity, right? So, um, pseudonymity it's a very sort of like a false sense of security, and I guess the stakes when you've got something like a blockchain are a lot higher. So if you're like a pseudonymous like persona on Twitter, right, you can go back and delete your old tweets and all before you get doxxed. But if you get doxxed on a blockchain, that like your entire record of history is there forever for like eternity, right? And so it's not even a matter of like, oh well, I'm careful now, so like I'm going to be private, right? You can be as careful as like you know whatever, right? You can be really careful now. You have the best privacy practices and all, but as soon as like you make one screw up, like oh like 40 years down the line, I accidentally copied and pasted the wrong Ethereum address, and like now everyone knows my Ethereum address, and that's linked to my profile. Like as soon as you do that, it's like all of the 40 years of careful privacy that you've been trying to like you put all the effort into, that's all undone immediately. So it's a lot easier to
Or even not even by your own hand, you know?
yeah. So it's like it only takes like one minor screw up in order to completely undo all of your effort. So the stakes are a lot higher when it comes to privacy in crypto. Like you actually need real privacy. You can't rely on these like weak forms of privacy.
So again, like I'm really looking forward to the future where we do know a little bit more about the people behind the protocols and less about how much they have in their wallet for sure, or tracking people back down through their profile pic, what NFT they bought or all those types of things. Like I think there can be. I think it'll be interesting to see more healthy, open conversations when we know a little bit more about the people behind what we're doing. I don't know. What do you think about that, Kai, as being a gigabrain behind a protocol?
Yeah, I mean, this sort of like you spend any kind of amount of time in a crypto Telegram room, you can see how crazy things can get, and like how quickly people just start spiraling into these assumption loops based on some transaction that they saw on a blockchain, right? And there's if you're like you invent a new crypto protocol, right? Like you hold a certain amount of tokens for yourself. Like obviously you're going to want to liquidate that someday, right? And as like a developer, right? There's legitimate reasons that you'd want to liquidate some crypto. Like maybe you want to pay an auditor, or you want to pay like a graphics designer or something, right? So you need to move funds around, but it's just these panic spirals that you see very quickly. So it's like it's sort of I guess there's usefulness to being able to right, it's your funds, right? Like you're gonna you want to be able to do what you like, what you wish with them. Like, it's not anyone else's business. So there's definitely a lot of like usefulness to being a public persona and not having all of your all of your like actions scrutinized under a microscope and people going crazy over them.
No, yeah, like I definitely agree, and I've been seeing more and more like whales and other people that are influential in the space, like starting to get like be more careful, like notice certain things, like for examples, like someone as huge as Tetranode has like on DBank and Zapper and all these like different like platforms has like hundreds of thousands of people like following them, and like Alan said earlier, that's why I'm really excited for Railgun, just because that, like, with Railgun at least, there's no more gonna be these people like hunting down, like, or like going on Twitter posting like like liquidations, and or like who's about to get liquidated, and or like how to, or like try to, in a way, kind of like attack these people, which is why like I would love for like Alan to like not only to like explain like the other options that people have for privacy, but how does like Railgun compare to them?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess if we think about like the broad ecosystem in where it is right now, you have fundamentally a couple of different things, right? You have things like non-custodial mixers, again, that's like Tornado Cash, Typhoon, and all the other forks of what Tornado is doing. You have your layer twos like Aztec, and then you have like maybe your other blockchains, if you will, and those are perhaps bifurcated into smart contract capable and just simple peer-to-peer like Monero and Zcash. It's like Monero and Zcash are really great, right? I mean, they protect privacy, and whether you agree with how they use you know zero knowledge. Monero is using bulletproofs, where Zcash is using recursive snarks now, I guess. Those offer the ability for people to take and transact privately peer to peer, but are at arm's length ultimately away from DeFi, right? And that's kind of like one of the biggest issues for a lot of these privacy solutions is that like where DeFi is happening right now, they are not, right? And so things like Secret Network, and I like those guys a lot. Tor and their team, they're really brilliant dudes, nice guys too. And but they have a really tough battle that they're going to face, where they have to try to lure builders to come into their ecosystem, and we've seen this become quite a challenge for lots of people, including like Harmony and others, where they have these huge multi-hundred-million-dollar ecosystem funds, and they still just don't get a ton of traction. And I hope they do, because I'm a proponent for privacy, but it's definitely a really difficult thing. It's like the horses are at water, and you're trying to lure them to another watering hole. They don't really have a lot of incentive to leave the delicious water that they're at already, right? And so that leaves Tornado Cash, and then Aztec, I guess. And I guess like one of the biggest issues with something like a non-custodial mixer is that it doesn't allow you to arbitrarily interact with like DeFi, right? I think that's one of the biggest things. Like mixers are really cool, but they have a lot of limitations in terms of like how they work, right? So like Tornado Cash allows you to take and deposit tokens in like fixed increments. So you could deposit what is it, 0.01, 0.1, 110, and then like 100 ether, whatever that is, right? Um, and I don't know about you guys, but just quick poll of the people here chatting today, who here has exactly one of those amounts in their wallet? Anybody?
None.
Yeah, none of us, right? So like it's really quite tough to like effectively leave behind change in a wallet with these assets being so high. So what do you got to do? You got to make like multiple transactions. So let's say you wanted to do like an arbitrary amount like 365.6, right? This is, hold on, let me think about this. This would be basically six transactions, right? So it would be six at point 0.1, five at 1, six at 10, and then three at 100, right? Which is ridiculous. This is a really complex transaction that you'd have to do in order to take and like privatize those assets and move them to a new wallet
And
through Tornado
that's
Cash.
how Zach gets you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. That's how it gets you, man. Because like, you pull out the exact amount on the other side, and so like it doesn't really offer you any. It's Look, mixers are an enhancement to privacy, right? They definitely are. It definitely helps with privacy, but it's not an ultimate solution, right? The best privacy that you could get would be like privacy at rest that allows you to take and deploy your capital from a private, um, from a private standpoint. So like, having private funds and then being able to do the DeFi stuff that you'd like to do, right? If you want to degen, you should be able to do it from your private balance. And that's kind of like the fundamental thing that Railgun's trying to do, right? Is effectively what's been built here is a ZK Snark based smart contract system that, allows you to do like true DeFi smart contract calls to your private balance that's like wholly on, layer one, so you have like an instantaneous, ability to take and deploy capital, you deploy your capital efficiently, right? Because people want to make yield on their money, right? And that's the whole point of like a lot of, DeFi, where it is today. And so I think that, long term, maybe Tornado Cash will pivot, and we're starting to see them kind of pivot. There's Nova, which basically allows arbitrary amounts, but I think they do that via XDAI at this point. Yeah, then I guess we have like what, Aztec? I think that seems to be like the hot thing. Didn't they just do a raise with like A16Z for like 100 million or something like that?
Something along those lines, yeah.
It was a lot. They raised a boatload of cash, which hats off to those dudes. It's an attestament, to like how important privacy is to be able to raise that kind of capital in a bear. You know what I mean? The market is like yeeted itself to oblivion, and like these guys are out raising tons of money. I think that this is really good. Just kind of like proving that people want privacy for sure. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of differences in between us and them too.
No, yeah, and those differences is something I'm interested in, just because I guess they're like the new kid on the block, and it's something that like people are wondering, and me as well, because as an example, they were talking about like how they're able to provide like really cheap transactions while still maintaining your privacy. But from I think, as all of us are aware, everything has its like consequences or its drawbacks or like their weaknesses, which is something that like is interesting that not so many people are talking about. Like, not everything's perfect, or maybe that's just me being too much of a skeptic.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I think some of the things that we could point at. So I'd love to talk about like, what people could find, with Railgun as a, I guess we could pick issues with us first, right? And I think that, one of the compromises that you have to make when it comes to using Railgun is that it is expensive to use on Ethereum, right? So if you're going to use Railgun on Ethereum, the gas prices aren't cheap. We're talking about a transaction that is somewhere from, one to like the most complex transaction on Railgun being, just shy of like 2 million gas, which, in today's market is what ETH is practically free right now. So what is it, maybe 70 to like $180, something like that for a transaction.
Wow.
And so it's definitely not cheap. It's not cheap to use, right? So it's definitely a whale focused, product on Ethereum. But, there is, Polygon where it's practically free to use. I think it costs maybe like 8 cents at this point to use it on, on Polygon, so you can have your privacy there. But yeah, I mean, you gain a lot by being, purely on layer one, and that is the ability to like act immediately. So like one of the things, if we look at like Aztec, like, best we can tell, is that they have, admin keys and can, change the code unilaterally, however they would wish. So this means it's not really, decentralized. And when it comes to privacy, this is really quite, important, because it takes like one lawsuit or government agency, to take and like compromise them, and Railgun is, resilient in a, decentralized system that, Kai or I can't just go and unilaterally change the code. There has to be like a full-on governance process associated with this. And, the plebiscite of people who hold and stake that token have to take and, vote on these changes in order to do this kind of stuff. And so, this really, is a big difference. But I think one of the biggest difference is like the latency of a transaction. So like I'm wondering, Kai, maybe you can kind of, illuminate us on like those differences.
Yeah, so I know if we look at like the way that layer two or just rollups in general work, and this is applicable to Aztec, right? Because Aztec's a rollup based system. Essentially, you take a set of transactions, and the idea is verifying those transactions as a batch is cheaper than verifying each transaction individually, at least on the Ethereum side, right? So each transaction has to go through, gets batched together, and once the fees of each individual transaction the cumulative fees of each transaction adds up to like equal to or greater than the cost to verify the entire set of transactions as a batch. Then you publish that down to Ethereum, right? So if you look at most rollups at the moment, or like Aztec specifically, they don't. That process has to be subsidized because the volume for transactions just isn't there, right? So you never, you're not going to be able to like get to the point where you're publishing down to ETH with any sort of regularity. So you end up essentially committing to a rollup window where you checkpoint back down to ETH. Right now, that is every 6 hours on Aztec. So that the result that you get out of that is let's say let's say you submit a transaction. You can be like really lucky. You submit a transaction, you want to do a Uniswap trade on Ethereum. You can get really lucky, and you happen to submit it as like one of the last transactions in a batch. Your Uniswap trade gets like executed almost instantaneously. But if you're unlucky, then you submitted just after the batch gets committed. Now you got to wait till the next batch, and that's like, oh, I got to wait up to 6 hours in order for that to happen, right? So you don't get predictability around when your transaction is going to be executed. You don't really get predictability around like, like if the trade that you input now, like whether that'll still be like valid in 6 hours, or if the market moves against you and now you're like your Uniswap trade can't be executed. So that's sort of the drawback of running on a rollup or a layer 2.
Yeah, and so like I mean, and it's worse than that too, like 'cause swaps are one thing, like, um, imagine trying to like service your margin with whether and not knowing whether or not you'll be able to service that margin in time before you get liquidated, right? And so they have like this ability, right? And I do want to be fair, like they have the ability to take and like immediately transact, right? So this exists, right? So you can click a button and do an immediate transaction with Aztec. However, there's like a huge drawback to this. So these guys use Plonk, right? Which is I'm definitely not the guy to tell you guys about Plonk. You can get some really cool nerdy cryptographers on here to talk about that. But you're doing a Plonk zero knowledge proof, right? Which is massively expensive, right? It's huge, right? These things are really cost intensive. So in order to get that like immediacy, you got to pay for this Plonk proof, right? Which is really cool for like everybody, who happen to like piggyback their transactions onto your need to do something immediately. But you're at a severe disadvantage because you're going to have to pay like 10 million gas, so effectively like 10x what a Railgun transaction would be, in order to take and get that like immediate effect. So it does exist, right? You can, pedantically speaking, do an Aztec transaction immediately, but it literally costs an arm and a leg, man. There's no way around it. Like it is. It's out of reach, well out of reach for like most transactions by a landslide.
Yeah, so as a retail investor, a shrimp, how are protocols to the point where we can have anonymity and be cost effective, or is this truly just, whether it's Aztec or Railgun or whatever the situation is it just a whale game at this point?
Yeah, so like on Ethereum, at this point, you have, it's kind of, if we just kind of, let's just talk about Ethereum. I think it's probably the easiest thing,
let me
right?
clarify. Nothing else exists other than Ethereum in my world. So,
Agreed.
although
fair.
shout out to Arbitrum.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
shout out to our
Arbitrum
boys at RB.
L2s.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And yeah, anyway, suffice it to say, man, like it's kind of like this give and take, right? So like with Railgun, it's purely deployed on layer one, and so you get like this immediacy, like single block, transaction. So when you submit a swap, that swap happens right now, right? Whenever you take and send tokens, it happens immediately. It's executed, right? The drawback there is that, you're going to spend, something like, depending on how expensive gas is, 50 to $200, right? For a transaction, which naturally kind of, makes the burden of using it, to be, for whales. You know what I mean? If you're doing like a $20,000 transaction, or even, let's say you're doing $1 million, transaction, maybe you're like, the size of Tetranode or something like this, for privacy, guys of that size, or, Genesis or something like this. I'm thinking like hedge funds, like these guys would pay $200 to be private, right? Because the last thing that they want to do is like dox their alpha. You know what I mean? If they have like a secret farming strategy, or like they're accumulating a position in a token, or even worse, trying to get out, right? They need to have privacy. And so like if they, had the opportunity to spend $200 to, avoid that alpha leak, they would certainly do it. But it does certainly raise that like bar of entry to like a higher notional value, right? And then you have like Aztec, where like it is cheaper, right? It's definitely cheaper to use. It's a little bit more in the realm of, um, you know, guys like, I don't know how rich you guys are. Maybe you're loaded, but guys like me, Aztec, would be a little bit more, reasonable. But like the the disadvantage here is that it's a severe delay, and one of the things that I care about is like latency of a trade. In 6 hours, like ETH could be like $1,000 different. You know what I mean? So like we're talking about like 100% gains could be missed out on, because you had to wait for, your transaction to clear. Or even worse, it doesn't get executed at all because the prices move so far, the prices slip so far away from where you want it to execute that you miss out on a move. And so like it's kind of like this, um, you kind of got to like weigh the benefits. And I kind of see, and that's why like I hate to call it like competition, because I don't see it as competition. I kind of see like there's going to be, in the future probably like a multifarious like, privacy ecosystem that, some transactions can wait. And, Railgun, we could actually take and, go the other way and, batch transactions to save on cost, and still perform those on layer one. This kind of thing is possible, but I kind of see it, ultimately there'll be like a bunch of different ways to do it, right? A lot of players in the space. I don't think this is a zero sum, one privacy solution to rule them all kind of environment.
No, yeah, I definitely understand, and I agree with you. Everyone likes like a competition, or like tries to put like protocols or people against each other, but like I do agree, like having a lot of options is really good, and actually having competition, is proven to actually help like the growth of the ecosystem, and like sectors in general. So like I agree with you. There's probably gonna be different options, and I'm really glad that you both have gone and explained the differences between Railgun and Aztec and mixers and all that, because for like a lot of retail investors, me included, like this stuff gets really complicated, and like being able to understand it in like less than 30 minutes is really handy. I could tell you that myself.
Yeah, like shout out to Kai, this dude makes this stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's insane. It's absolutely nuts to me, like even for me, I work on this protocol on a daily basis, 7 days a week. And like, I mean, it's massively complicated. I mean, the amount of stuff that I've had to like read and learn about in terms of like cryptography and this kind of stuff, has just been, astounding. And, it can really get in the weeds, but like, you have to be really careful and do a lot of due diligence about like what the pros and cons are, and like the talking heads on Twitter, or even me on this podcast. Don't take my word as the gospel. Go out to your own due diligence. Weigh the pros and cons for what it is that you're doing in the ecosystem, and make that call. You know what I mean? And make that call.
So let's pivot to Kai for a second. I'm not looking for a long origin story or anything, but just why this protocol? Why privacy? What drove you to build in this space?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if like I've been involved with blockchain and like crypto for a fairly long time. I was like one of the first people mining on Bitcoin, and I have a it's either me or Artforce. There's a bit of a toss up there, but one of us was the first person to mine on a GPU with Bitcoin, right? So like I've been around for a while, and just sort of like thinking about
Did you buy the pizza?
I did not buy the pizza. Yeah, just thinking about like the excitement around Bitcoin, like after the first, let's say, year, because Bitcoin wasn't the first attempt at making a viable cryptocurrency. There's plenty that came before it, but it was the first successful one, right? So the first year was kind of like, oh well, we've tried this a million times before, it's not going to work. But after like, it proved itself by not dying in the first year, right? Like the excitement around like, oh, like this is what we've been trying to do for so long, however long amount of time that each person's been in it, and like all of the use cases and all that people were kind of envisioning, like that's why I stuck around crypto, but kind of going down through the years, it's kind of become obvious that, hey, the original like Bitcoin designer got a lot of things right, but there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. There's a lot of things that need to be changed, right? When you get everything right, and we've kind of gone through a couple of rounds of iterations. Like there's a whole explosion of different cryptocurrencies in 2014. We had like the whole ICO craze, 2017, 2018. Like 2022, or now there's like a bunch more of exploring that's going on. But I think to me, the kind of key thing that's missing, and I think is being under addressed, that really needs to be there if we want to go back and make all of the promise that people were seeing in crypto back in the early days. You want to make that a reality. I think like privacy is sort of the biggest thing that needs to be addressed, that just people aren't looking at yet, right? And I want this stuff to work, so it's like, hey, if no one else is gonna do it, well, I gotta do it, man. Like someone has to. Might as well be me.
Love it. So, where does it go? Where does privacy go, looking into the future?
Yeah, I think so. There's if you follow the evolution of privacy in crypto, right? You started out with things like is it like Bytecoin, which like later kind of went through a couple of forks and all turned into Monero. And then there's like Zcash and all, and those kind of like they took like a coin like Bitcoin and all, and made up a private version of it. So you look at the evolution of public cryptocurrencies. You went from Bitcoin, which is like purely just send. Come on, don't go to sleep again. All right. Yeah, so you had Bitcoin, which is purely sending coins back and forth. Very limited amount of programmability, and it moved on. And we started getting like things like Namecoin and all, where they had specific use cases attached to the coin, and eventually, a couple of iterations later, we end up with you go through Omni and all, we end up with Ethereum. Where we've essentially got like general purpose programmability on like actions that happen on chain, and like I don't see any reason why that sort of like level of improvement just doesn't keep happening, right? Like people are going to make better and better things. And then you look at privacy, right? So we didn't have privacy in Bitcoin. Monero and like Zcash were the first coins that kind of hit mainstream that had any privacy. And those are sort of at the level of Bitcoin, right? Like you can send coins back and forth without there's not really like much else you can do with them. And then we got like things like Komodo and all, which added like a private DEX, right? So you get the kind of name coin the name coin sort of thing for privacy. And then we go through the iterations and we're seeing general purpose contract platforms start to emerge now that are private. But the issue with where that's going is it's always playing a catch-up game, right? Like we're seeing innovation happening in public blockchains faster than people can create private chains that do the same thing and keep up, right? So we need to change up the approach that we take a bit. I think the way to address, like, no one's going to use like stuff that's like, oh, people are excited about DeFi now. People want to use DeFi, but if your private chain doesn't have DeFi, well, they can't use it. The way that we address the catch-up game that people have to play is, rather than trying to go off and make these new ground-up chains that are like private and catch up with where all the innovation's going, well, why don't we take the chains that all the innovation's happening on and enable privacy for them, right? So I think that's where Tornado started, right? Bringing privacy to Ethereum, which to me is where all the innovation's happening now. And then you've got other protocols that I've followed, so Aztec and Railgun. And so it's the question there is you got to be, it's like, how do you enable privacy without overly burdening the developers of new systems on these chains, right? Like, how do you make these chains private without like putting all these roadblocks in the way so innovation slows down? Because we don't want to hurt innovation. So I think the solution there is you approach it from the wallet side, right? So we've kind of seen this pattern in Ethereum where things like MetaMask have they haven't really changed all that much in however long they've been around, like 5 years now. I can, if I go back 5 years in time, right, I'm still installing my MetaMask browser extension. I'm still putting the same seed phrase in and like connect to a dApp website, right? So you kind of have this like core wallet infrastructure that doesn't really change, but allows for this programmability at the edge in like the kind of dApp websites and all, that allows for the innovation to happen there. So I think what you need to do is you got to approach it from the wallet side. You look at the core, where that sort of stable infrastructure is. Make that private, and then you allow the people that are building at the innovation to like use that and have that as a stable like infrastructure there for them to build applications on. And that, I think, moves or that allows for privacy to happen, or innovation to happen, while still having the benefits of privacy. So that's why Railgun's built the way it is.
Well, I love that you just sort of painted the picture, tied everything together on, where privacy has been and really the use case and understanding of why Railgun exists. I really appreciate that. But my question on privacy for you personally is I can find you on Twitter, like you personally. Why are you not anonymous if you're big in privacy?
Yeah. Look, privacy is not about hiding. I guess we got to make the distinction between privacy and anonymity, right? Privacy is not about hiding everything that's being anonymous, right? It's me having the right to choose who I reveal what part of my life to. Okay, so if I go to a doctor, like I'm gonna be quite happy for my doctor to be like, "Yo, you've got whatever XYZ medical condition. Let me treat you for that." I'm quite happy to share that with my doctor, but I'm not like sharing that with my barista, man. Like maybe I tell my barista, "Hey, I've got lactose, I'm lactose intolerant. Can you use almond milk?" But that's maybe the limit, right? I'm not gonna be like, "Yo, I've got stage 4, I don't know, XYZ. Pick your disease," right? Like my barista doesn't need to know that. That's between me and my doctor. If I'm on Twitter, maybe there's certain thoughts that I want to share with people. Maybe I want to say, "Hey, look at this new innovation that I'm working on with Railgun," which is probably the the predominant use of Twitter for myself, right? But that, I get to choose to share that with, on Twitter, basically the whole world. On my coffee shop with my barista, I choose what I reveal to people. I'm not kind of coerced or forced into being like, "Hey, look, this is everything," and that's sort of the core of what privacy is, right? Having that right to choose.
I love it. I think back to the beginning of LifeLock. I don't know if you even had that in your part of the universe, but the person who started LifeLock, which was an identity protection service, would give his social security number out, saying that they'd be able to protect it. And I think he got hacked a bunch of times, but but I think back to that on just sort of the beginning of privacy in my personal space and my journey is thinking along those lines. But I really appreciate you breaking it down that way, Kai.
No, yeah, same here. And I'm really glad you made that distinction because a lot of people kind of blur the two together. At least that's what I kind of see. A lot of people don't think they're two separate things. And it's important. I really respect your answers just because you choose what you want to reveal to people that you meet, to the world on Twitter, to people in real life. People need to realize that's, you don't have you don't have to be anonymous, but you still everyone deserves the right to hide what information they choose is worth hiding, or privacy. So I'm really glad that you cleared the distinction, because way too often people in DeFi and everything just lump the two together and completely forget the definition.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason I don't have a camera live streaming from my bathroom 24/7.
No, yeah, no.
Apple does, Google does.
Oh my god, but so before, because we're running kind of close on time, so we explained the background between these different privacy networks, and we explained about Railgun, but I'm not gonna lie, we're still a DeFi kind of degen channel. So before the end, I would appreciate if we go a little bit about the token. So I'm sure, because as you know, token is one of the best ways to get degen's attention. At least I know. Hopefully you do. So I would like for you to explain, because you guys do have a token. I would love for you guys to explain the value proposition of like the Rail token, and how does it capture value from the usage of people using your protocol, which I think is really important. If you could dive like a little bit into that, like now that we're towards the end.
Oh man, yeah, sure. There's a Rail token, right? And actually, there's the each individual chain has its own individual Rail token, and so you have Rail, which is for Ethereum. You have Rail Poly, which is for the Polygon ecosystem, and you have Rail BSC currently. There's been snapshots taken for Gali, Mansolana, and Near. Now the L2s that we'll be deploying on, Metis, Arbitrum, Optimism, that kind of stuff, those will be controlled by the Rail token. But primarily, these tokens are designed to be governance tokens, right? So people who buy and stake those get to decide what the protocol does and doesn't do by way of the governance portal. And unlike some DeFi governance. It is like true, on-chain governance, and there are some protocols out there in the world that exist that are just, I guess, suggestion boxes in a forum, right? But we actually take and put up hex code live in the governance portal for people to take and talk and discuss, and then ultimately vote on, right? And this includes like the smart contract code, right? So if there's a change that happen to the smart contract, you can decide whether or not that change happens. But governance isn't hyper sexy, right? So it does also govern the treasury associated with the protocol, and the protocol takes a basis points fee per transaction that accumulates in the respective treasuries of each token. So we have three treasuries currently: one on Polygon, one on BSC, and then of course one on Ethereum, and those cumulatively are right at $9.5 million. And so anybody who takes and stakes the token, has a right to, decide what happens to those funds. And I guess one of the number one, um, the number one thing that people want to do with those is pay a reward to themselves, right? Like that's the number one debated thing in our the DAO scored, as we call it, or our Discord for stakers. Is to discuss, when the fee distributions are going to happen to stakers, and when staking rewards are going to come. And yeah, I guess I'm happy to, alpha leak here that it's going to be mega soon. So that code is being stress tested, gas optimized, and then soon to be put up for vote to the DAO. And yeah, it'll start paying out rewards to stakers. So yeah, you'll get your fair share of what's in the treasury.
Can you break down token distribution a little bit too? Is it all two whales that hold everything? Is there unlocks coming up? Just what's some of the things look like in the whole tokenomics of Rail?
Yeah. So good question. I like this. Yeah. So it is. I don't know. Let's look. Let's look at the contract, man. I'm a big fan of that. So if we look at the holders of it, the number one holder of the tokens right now is the staking contract. So everybody is currently staking the hell out of the out of the tokens, and then the original, I guess the initial, I should say, development of the protocol was done by way of grant sponsorship by a privacy foundation out of the UK called the Right to Privacy Foundation. And then the rest were airdropped back in, when was that? July? I forget. And so, yeah, 25% of the supply went to the Right to Privacy Foundation, and then another 25% of the supply was minted and airdropped. And then the last 50% of that was um, set up for the DAO to vote whether or not to mint, right? So they could actually take and mint up to a hard cap of 100 million tokens. And as it sits right now, they have minted 7.5 million of those tokens. And the DAO structured a deal to do a strategic partnership with the likes of LD Capital, and then of course DCG. And Digital Currency Group has been a really great partner for us They have a lot of really great subsidiary companies like Foundry. Those guys are helping us with like nodes and development of code, and so it's been really great for us to take and align with those guys. They agreed to lock up their tokens for 2 years, so no impending doom in lockups either. So it's pretty well dispersed. There's nobody holding a massive stake of the tokens. So maybe I think the largest holder maybe has like maybe 3 to 5% if I had to like stab in the dark without like digging too hard and dancing.
Thanks for going a little bit into that, and no, and I'm really glad that you kind of like clarified, because that's something that a lot of degens are actually looking at, is because people are really tired to be dumped on, and talking about getting dumped on. So I was wondering, so you said that you're stress testing the staking contract and everything, or something like along those lines. So I was wondering if you could go into, is there emissions? Will it be mainly emissions that stakers would be getting back, or would you give back to stakers some sort of value in something other than rail tokens?
Oh God, yeah, I would rather, I don't know, die than give inflationary or deflationary tokenomics. So no, no, there's not going to be any sort of like buyback burn or anything like that. I think that those tokenomics aren't very appealing in today's economy. And so like the way the staking distribution is, I guess the staking rewards, we can call them, is that it'll be in like tokens that are in the treasury, right? So it's not like you get more rail tokens or something like this. It'll be actual assets in the treasury that'll be dispersed, right? And so the treasury collects fees from people transacting within the Railgun smart contract, right? So if you transact convex tokens, it collects convex tokens. If you transact Tether, it collects Tether. If you transact Shiba Inu, great news, it has it'll do Shiba Inu for you. And so um, it collects like a myriad of tokens, and this is actually really cool because it also creates like a treasury that's like really resilient, right? Because if like we were something like not to call out Uniswap or anything, but if we were Uniswap and like a large portion of our treasury was in Rail tokens, like this would create like extreme directional risk to our own token, like, and that just wouldn't be good for sustainability. So rather, the treasury accumulates like a myriad of tokens, right? And at this point, it's largely in stables, right? So there's 7.4 million DAI in there. And that'll be the brunt of the distribution. So basically what'll happen is you'll get your fair share of the tokens in the treasury, right? So whatever tokens are accumulating in the treasury is the exposure that you'll get in rewards by buying and staking the token.
Love it. All right, got a couple more questions, and then we'll get to the end here. But again, we were talking a little bit in the before the show started, and it got me thinking about stables. And you just mentioned stables being in your treasury, but just to pivot a little bit again, looking into the future, I see a day where we're using our debit card attached to stables, and we're buying things, and we are going to want to make sure that people can't see those transactions. So what does that connection with Rail look like in the future as stable coins become probably the overarching currency around the world in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess if we talk about like the state of the union now, right, is that if that were to play out in today's world, let's say you have your crypto, stable debit card. We should make a DAO. We'll call it, I don't know, crypto debit card stable DAO. I'd love to set that up with you guys. But um, yeah, if you were to
I
swipe
think
that,
Voyager tried that.
yeah, they did. It didn't go so hot, but
Before they went down.
yeah, rest in peace. Um, the Yeah, so if you took your debit card and you swiped it and it was attached to the Ethereum network, you're basically doxing yourself and your wallet in all like your degenerate activities, which crypto dick butts you hold and all of these different things, right? Which is no good, right? The last thing that I think that you would like is, to go to Starbucks to buy a coffee and then have not only the barista but the Starbucks Corporation and everybody in there to, have the right to track you and all of your financial data, right? So if, for example, somebody who was worth a lot of money goes into a place and swipes their crypto debit card, hypothetically, in this straw man I'm assembling, um, it would, you'd be able to see like, holy cow, that guy's worth a ton of money, right? And this can create a, a bad scenario for like data collection, or even worse, like personal security, right? And so like there has to be like a separation of like bank statements from like your ability to transact, and that's what we have today in like traditional finance. Like when you go in and you swipe your debit card from whatever your favorite traditional bank is, maybe it's Wells Fargo or something like this. You swipe your Citibank card. People don't get to know like what your bank balance is, or your transaction history is, or that you went to Walmart before that to buy apples. Who knows, right? It's none of their business. And so, like, what Railgun is designed to do is effectively act like an incognito mode, right, for a wallet. So you can take and have like shielded assets that you could transact with in a private fashion. So it effectively is like a ZK Snark based smart contract wallet, right, that allows you to transact privately, effectively like giving you back that privacy that you just innately assume is there for like your traditional finances, i.e., I swipe my debit card, I buy gas, and 7-Eleven is none the wiser as to like how much money I have. My privacy is protected. And I think that the future, if it will be like that traditional finance is taken over by like crypto and like, DeFi is the rails, yeah, we'll definitely need some sort of like privacy solution like this.
So I really just have one more question. But before that, how often do you talk to Sifu?
Daily, bro.
Okay, fair enough. So funds are Sifu there as well.
No affiliation.
He's
yeah,
just
like
an
quick
advisor. Yeah, he's just an advisor.
Yeah.
No. Like in all seriousness, before like crypto Twitter starts raging, it's just just a joke, just a joke. Just kind of how people like hate him nowadays.
I don't know. Kai, are you friends with Sifu?
Oh man, I'm friends with the Sifu memes.
Oh my god, but. Well, I was wondering, Keith, is it okay if I, like, I'm actually really excited to ask, like, one question to them. So
Fire away. Fire away.
before you ask the last question. So, one thing I'm interested in is that you guys have separate coins for every chain. So, one thing I was wondering, since they're separate coins and they're distinct from each other, how does that affect your community, and how would that like affect different people? Because I'm assuming like each chain is gonna have their own like staking APY, and each chain is gonna have to have their own community, because just because you own Rail Poly is not gonna be the same as like Rail on mainnet Ethereum or BSC. So I was wondering, like, how does that affect your community and the protocol in general and governance? Or do I have the right idea? I would like for you to explain that, just because I don't know many other projects that do have their token layout the same as you guys.
Yeah, it is very, very unique, and we do get a lot of questions about it. And you are on the right track that these do have like their own, independent supplies and market caps. And eventually, the treasuries will accrue at like different rates, and it's quite interesting to watch, like, kind of like live currently. Like Ethereum is like whale transactions. So we're seeing like, $100,000, $1 million transactions come through, like Railgun on ETH, but like the Polygon and BSC deployments are seeing perhaps a more a smaller but higher frequency, right? So we have like $100, $200, $500, $10,000 transactions that are pouring through on like Polygon and BSC, and so they'll accumulate at like different rates, and ultimately, I don't know how you like price your tokens or evaluate them for like how much you feel like they're worth, but perhaps like one of the things that you'll do is like see, hey, there's X amount in the treasury, so this token is worth this much because the yield is this based on like, how it works, right? But, really the core reason why this happened is because we're really staunch believers in like decentralization, and currently the technology doesn't really exist for like true decentralized like cross-chain governance. And before I like I don't know, butcher the explanation of this, I would love it if Kai, you could kind of like give us the lay of the land. I know that like things like Sushi Swap, for example, collect fees and then like manually bridge them back with a multi-sig, which, we just don't believe in. We want it to be like fully decentralized, no admins, no nothing, even when it comes to like treasury management. So, um, but yeah, I'd love for you to kind of, talk about it on a technical side, Kai.
Yeah, I think the most so so Railgun, like I think we talked about this a bit earlier in the show as well, but Railgun, the way that the governance works is like what you see on chain as like, if you look at any of the governance proposals, there's right at the bottom, if you look at the governance portal, there's a list of contract calls, right? And that's the exact list of contract calls that will happen if the governance proposal passes. And that's all enforced on chain. So, like, if a proposal passes, that's what happens. There's no admin keys or anything, right? And we want to preserve that across each different chain that Railgun's deployed on. And one of the most tricky things to bridge between chains is governance actions. So with tokens, they're kind of like fungible, right? So you can send things into into a particular locking address on one chain and like mint them out on the other. You can have various different methods, but essentially you're just really sending a number back and forth, and it doesn't really matter like how many times that number gets sent back and forth or anything. Like, it's as long as the number arrives. But with governance proposals, you're trying to send raw contract calls through a bridge, and you need to, there's the number of like moving parts that need to work right in order for that to happen. Like, you need to, so you've got the governance process, say on ETH, that then would go to whatever bridge. That bridge would then have to serialize all of those contract calls correctly, send them to the bridge contract on the other chain, and then that bridge contract would then have to execute those calls with proof that the originating contract on the original governance chain, so in ETH in this case, right, would be so it would need to sufficiently prove that the governance contract on the ETH side is actually the initiator of the transaction. So you got to make sure that, like, let's say, you got to make sure that the serialized contract calls get sent over correctly, and there's no way to compromise that. B, you got to make sure that the bridge contract on the other end, that doesn't get compromised, because now the owner of all of the contracts on the other chain is the bridge contract, and that's like, oh, okay, well, now I've got a contract that controls like the upgrade of the protocol that's written and like managed by a separate protocol. What if like that protocol decides, even if that protocol's got like a good decentralized governance system and there's no admin keys, what if the governance on that protocol like decides, hey, I'm going to upgrade the bridge contract to be malicious because they're like a protocol that's decided to compete with Railgun, right? Like, they could go and do that, right? So you've got that attack surface. What happens if someone figures out a way to send a bridge call, a contract call through the bridge to your contract deployments on another chain, and they figure out a way to fake the originator being the governance contract on your origin chain, right? Like the number of things that could go wrong, and the number of like dependencies that you have on systems that are not necessarily aligned or don't necessarily have the same interests that Rail governance voters or Rail token holders like have, that's very high risk. So the way that most protocols get around it is they'll have, let's say, the deployment on Ethereum, and like maybe the Ethereum side is properly decentralized governance, but they'll like have a multi-sig that, you know, pinky promises to send all the governance actions to the other chains correctly. So with Railgun, like we're explicitly trying to avoid having admin keys or like a multi-sig that manages things. So the only real way to do this in a trustless manner without having either a huge attack surface or potential conflicts of interest with other projects that might want to attack Railgun is to do it without a bridge. You have to have separate governance deployments and separate governance tokens in each chain. So that's the technical reason for it.
And you know, from my limited understanding, it makes sense because bridges are getting destroyed everywhere here in 2022. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
Unless, Keith, you have any other questions. I guess when you talk about bridges, I could bring up one last final questions before we do the end of the show.
Yeah, go for it.
So, talking about bridges and how, and as you guys know, there's been a lot of bridge hacks in these past few months. Will that affect your treasury at all? Because you have treasuries in every platform, well, not platform, like Ethereum, Polygon, BSC. Will you guys use bridges? Do you guys trust bridges, etc.? Stuff like that. Wondering if one of you guys can answer for us.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't really like bridges. I tend to stay away from them just because like they've clearly just been like the attack vector for them is just really quite large, and so like it creates like, you know, risk of funds, and I want my funds to be Seifu, not with Sifu, right? So I personally tend to avoid them, but then the protocol itself does as well, right? And so like, you know, people could take and, you know, technically call a bridge and like use a bridge with Railgun, like on a pedantic sense, but like in terms of like governance, the treasuries and things like that, there isn't any like bridging of assets that goes on, and that's from a protocol hardness perspective, and, you know, very intentional architectural choice. You know, we don't want bridges to be you know, part of it. And so, you know, in order to make sure that funds are safe, you know, they're just, you know, broadly avoided in the architecture of Railgun. And this includes the treasuries, so no risk of funds there.
I mean, I guess like I just want to like double. I think it was like Keith that stated, right, like, you know, bridges have an attack vector. Like they're, you know, getting hacked left, right, and center, right, and that's true. But I just kind of want to double highlight the potential like conflict of interest angle, right? Trusting your protocol to a bridge is very risky. Even if if you have someone that has the perfect bridge that'll never get hacked, and you somehow you know, had a guarantee of that, right? Let's say that you've got Awesome Bridge DAO, and Awesome Bridge DAO has the perfect bridge that will never get hacked. And we have Railgun putting all of our governance and our treasury through Awesome Bridge DAO. Like, what happens if your Awesome Bridge DAO has Sniper Rifle that competes with Railgun, right? Then it's in their best interest to just like say, hey, we're going to upgrade the bridge contract on like all of the other chains to be like, hey, hijack the Railgun protocol and send their entire treasury to our treasury, send all of the like funds to Sifu that is like in their wallet. Like, even if you have the perfect bridge protocol, you're entering a situation where you're trusting in the goodwill of another project that may not necessarily be aligned with your project. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong if you're putting a protocol through a bridge.
Thank you for that explanation. Way more technical than me just saying that bridges are getting destroyed everywhere. But I appreciate you breaking that down, because it feels like double jeopardy, right? You know, there's so many links in the chain that can be broken as you're, you know, stacking the DeFi Legos, and then to add a bridge on top of that. There's just danger in putting 100% trust in another protocol. So appreciate that explanation. But let me ask our final go-to question here, and we'll give you both a chance to answer this. But it's now 2025. Everything at Railgun has gone perfectly according to plan. What does that look like? What does 2025 look like with perfection with Railgun?
Woof. Kyle, you first.
Yeah. So I brought up the example of like why Railgun's taking the approach that it is earlier, you know, by saying, okay, like you've currently got essentially MetaMask as the kind of stable center that a lot of innovation happens with in Ethereum, right? And the goal of Railgun is to privatize that stable center. So for me, essentially, Railgun takes a sort of like MetaMask role in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's like, this is the wallet, or this is the protocol that people go through in order to remain private while using all of these cool new DeFi things that people are making. I mean, I don't know if that's Railway, which is probably that's the currently it's the only interface to Railgun right now. So whether that be Railway or if MetaMask decides to integrate Railgun and they end up being the most popular interface, whatever the interface ends up being, I just want Railgun to be that kind of stable core that provides privacy while people get to innovate elsewhere.
Yeah, man, that's a lot better than my answer is going to be. Rail to 10. No, I think I think took it aside. I think I think what would be really great. I'd consider a great win if we accomplish this over the next 3 years. Would be that we have a lot of the key integrations that people want, and people can take and use privacy where they see fit, right? So I believe success would be like mass adoption throughout multiple wallets, not just Railway, but MetaMask, and maybe even like institutional players like Fireblocks and Copper, and maybe there's even like a Gnosis Safe App and things like this. Like there's all sorts of different developments that happen, and maybe even I don't know, it might take longer than 3 years, but maybe Ledger will finally give us like EDDSA, baby jub, like signature support, so we can have like private transactions with hardware, all these different things. Like I just want to see. I think that by 2025, if like privacy as a narrative has like a good connotation, like we will have won, right? Because at this point, there's several straw men that are being built around like why privacy isn't good, and I think that I think privacy is normal, and I think privacy is needed, and in the future, 3 years from now, if we have the ability to transact privately and I can protect my financial data, whether that be with Railgun, and I, personally hope it is, then, I think that like the long-term trajectory for crypto is very, very bullish. That's what I believe.
Man, I feel like we could talk for several more hours. I have several more topics written down. Would love to have you back if you all are available to continue the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
But okay, awesome. Well, I am going to wish you all a good day. Alejandro, any final words?
No, thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait to talk to you guys again. I hope it's soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and looking forward to being back on.
Kingmaker Podcast.